Hello, my name is Mark Vicente. I am a filmmaker, a husband, a cult whistleblower, and as we're about to discuss, I am also a spiritual geek. I'm most well known as being the director of the movie What the Bleep Do We Know, the docudrama, and also for escaping a cult and helping take it down, which was chronicled in an HBO series called The Vow. So I'm sort of taking a leap here with this new channel, new podcast idea. But I want to explain quickly why this new thing called Remember Your Greatness. When I left this organization, Nixium, I became fascinated with, I suppose, the darkness, with what was the pathology of the leader? How did I get fooled? What was going on? And I've spent the last few years really immersed in trying to understand narcissism, sociopathy, psychopathy, the abuse of spirituality. And it's been a few years, and I've had this podcast called WTF is on My Mind, where I talk about pretty much everything and anything. That's not true. I talk about certain things. And that's the point of all of this. I've found that a lot of what I talk about on that podcast is very dark, and I think it's important to talk about. But I noticed that when I began talking about hope, goodness, I suppose light, dreaming, a new life, that kind of thing, I found that two things happened. The audience did not like it. That's the one thing. But the algorithm didn't like it either. Like the minute I talked about good things, YouTube would just hide my shit. So what I've been doing is mostly just talking about, cults, cult recovery, my journey, which has been pretty dark and has taken a number of years to get to the point that I am now. But I feel like I've been living two lives. I sort of abandoned, during my time in this cult, I kind of abandoned, not kind of, I did to a large degree abandon a lot of my spiritual thinking, feelings. Because understand, the movie What the Bleep Do We Know came out of years and years of me thinking about spirituality, like what is this? Who am I? What is this thing that we're living in, this material thing we're living in? Is there more than just this? And that led me to a lot of people, a lot of groups, a lot of teachings, and of course, a number of cults. And I think it was this insatiable curiosity that I had to understand the nature of reality and understand myself. But I sort of abandoned that. And during my time in the cult as well, although they enrolled me and got me in based on their admiration for the film What the Bleep Do We Know, the minute I got in, they, especially the leader, began ridiculing the film. And I sort of abandoned to some degree my immense pride in making the film. And there were also some very, very ugly things that happened behind the scenes. And I was very, very hurt. And I sort of just separated myself from the film, but I also separated myself from my own spirituality. When I got out of the cult, and again, all of this is chronicled in the other podcast and in the HBO series, The Vow, when I got out, I abandoned with prejudice and hatred all spirituality. And I decided, it was very extreme. I thought, okay, well, Jesus was a psychopath and Buddha was probably a sociopath. And I just hated them all. And it took me about 2 years after the trial, which happened in 2019, to begin having some very profound experiences and reconnecting to my quest, which is what has driven me for much of my life. Certainly starting as a young boy in South Africa, I was driven to understand what were these feelings I was having, what were these profound moments in my life, because nobody could explain it to me. And certainly religion at that time was not explaining it to me very well at all. But anyway, I've been in the closet publicly about a lot of these, the subject of spirituality. I've been discussing it ad nauseum for years, and I've been mentoring people for a number of years, but I haven't talked a lot about it. So in my private life, in my marriage with some of my friends, I have these sort of in-depth discussions about spirituality and about the nature of existence and consciousness. So the podcast WTF is on My Mind is dark. This particular podcast or this channel, I'm not sure if it's a channel or a podcast. Certainly it's a channel on YouTube. Won't dwell so much on the darkness, but if you prefer that, just head on over to WTF is on my mind. My interest is in the questions of what this experience is, the nature of existence, the nature of reality, the nature of consciousness. And as I said, that quest led me into a number of cults. So I'm going to be unpacking a lot of things, a lot of stuff that I've been talking about, to a large extent already, but also stuff I'm discovering along the way. So a lot of this will be, to some degree, discussing my journey, my quest that led me to some wonderful things and to betrayal, to abandonment of all that I valued, and then to reapproach spirituality, but on my own terms. Now, let me say something that's kind of important. I do have a fear about starting this particular channel, this particular podcast. There's a number of fears. The one is, I abandoned all of that so much, and I had such a profound hatred for coercion, lying, the kinds of shit that happens in bad cults and bad organizations and bad religions, that I realized I never want to be that person ever. I never want to do anything that will mislead people. That's the one thing. So I don't want to cause harm. And I recognize that me sort of so-called coming out of the closet to talk about these things publicly, there is every chance in the world that people that are very codependent are going to be like, oh my God, he's going to start talking about this stuff. He knows the answer. I don't know the answer. I have no answers. I have a lot of questions, and I have my experience for myself. So for myself, I have answers. And I no longer look at texts and books and teachings as though they have the answer. What I do now is I check in deeply with myself. But I am terrified of causing harm. I am concerned that people will follow me with some kind of blind obedience, that I will become this authority in their life, and they will no longer question for themselves, that they will abandon their autonomy, I should say, and their authority. And I think I'm also a little afraid of the shit I'm going to get, because understand, when I started mentioning that I was doing mentoring, the Reddit threads exploded with ridicule. It was really interesting. And I've been doing it for a number of years. I don't talk about it very much, and people follow me, and sometimes I mention it, then they reach out to me, and I have some amazing clients that I mentor, like really, really special people. But I don't talk much about it publicly. So this is me beginning to talk about it publicly. So yes, am I going to get shit? Absolutely. So there's a series of things that I'm worried about, given that I really believe I have a good understanding of cults and the pathology of cult leaders. I don't believe I have the pathology, but, I still have concerns about having people blindly believe every single word I say as the truth and the gospel, because it's not. Look, let me put it this way, though. I do have a lot of wisdom. I will acknowledge that. I've been screwed over in the most profound ways. I have seen the most beautiful aspects of spirituality, and I have seen the very worst. I have faced evil a number of times in my life, and especially the last few years, I have seen a level of evil that is breathtaking. So I have a lot of wisdom, but I'm concerned about how that will land, and I'm concerned about people, as I said, and I keep on repeating this, giving up their own autonomy. So those of you listening, watching, don't do that. Don't give up your own autonomy. But there are things I want to talk about. I want to talk about reclaiming What the Bleep. I want to talk about reclaiming the film and reclaiming a lot of the dreams I had in making the film and why it was so important to make the film. I want to talk about religion versus spirituality. I mentioned that I don't look at texts as though they have the truth anymore. I look at, or I feel my experience of something, is it true for me? Then I might pursue looking to see, so have people in the past talked about what seems to be the same experience, then I'm really interested. I obviously want to talk about the nature of I can't even say it. I want to talk about the nature of existence, whether it's even possible to truly experience reality, or if it's just, a sliver that we experience. Do we even have the equipment to understand it completely, or do we just understand a very, very small part of it? And also, I want to talk about spiritual bypassing versus deeply embedding yourself in life. I've talked about this a lot in the other podcast about spiritual bypassing, about avoiding one's own pain and one's own fear, and then building a false sense of self, which is narcissism, to avoid all the discomfort, the shame, feelings of failure, whatever it is. So that's one model of trying to do it. And I don't think it's good. And I think it misleads people, versus deeply embedding yourself in your own life and everything that you're feeling and not making it bad. Because one of the things I see people do, they reject, let's say, certain religions that talk about sin, but then they take on like some kind of a new agey thing where now they're talking about sinful shit inside. They just don't call it sin. They call it something else. Maybe they call it the shadow. Maybe they call it like whatever, distortions, whatever they call it. But it's the same kind of model. Like there's something inside you that's rotten and you need to excise it from you. And I'm more interested in including all of those things in the equation of being ourselves. So yeah, I want to talk about spirituality versus embodiment, deeply embodying things. I also want to talk about, what the hell is enlightenment? Because people have been talking about it for a long, long time. I believe that I have misunderstood what enlightenment is for many, many years. For me, I now believe I have a better idea of what it is, and it's not what I thought it was. And also, I'm going to talk about my spiritual experiences, the amazing stuff, the pitfalls, the breakthroughs, the misunderstandings. I also want to talk about, near-death experiences, the other side, ghosts, that kind of thing. And I'm going to have a bunch of interesting people on the podcast. And just so you know, I think given the certain concerns and fears I have about this podcast, this video that I'm putting out now is sort of my introduction to Remember Your Greatness, sort of trailer, whatever you call it, first episode. But the next person that I'm going to have on, or the person I'm going to have on for my next episode, is somebody who is going to hopefully help me with my fears and concerns. Somebody I really admire and just met recently for the first time in person. We've been following each other online, and they're going to help me with some of these things. So that's going to be probably episode number 2. There's a ton of people that I want to talk to, people that the algorithm will not enjoy me talking about on WTF is My Mind. But I'm going to really spread my wings on this one. There's a lot of stuff like just sitting inside me that I want to express, that I've been sitting on. And those of you on WTF is On My Mind might remember my second podcast with Africa Brooke was sort of a therapy session. And some of the stuff came up. Some of the stuff came up of like the stuff I'm not talking about. So one last thing, I'm probably not going to do this in a very polished way. I'm not interested in trying to convince you that I'm awesome and be a fake and act in a fake way. I just want to be me. I don't know how much editing I'm going to do in terms of like editing out like mistakes and blumbles and fumbles and whatever, because I think that's very, very human. And I have trepidation about starting this. And I think it's good to just, have those things in there. So I'm just going to try to have conversations. When it's just me and you. And then when it's other people, just have conversations. I am endlessly curious. Those of you on WTF is On My Mind know I say at the end, stay curious. I am endlessly curious. And I have a lot of things I still want to understand. And then a lot of things I want to express. And then, of course, I also want to express the wisdom that I get to express privately, with my wife, with my friends, and with my clients, that I have not done publicly. So it's time for that to come out. So I would love it if you would join me here as we traverse, I suppose, inner space. So I'll see you soon.